Hi, Kim. Thanks so much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with us. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I want to jump right in with, we've got a set of circumstances right now, a global pandemic, unlike anything we've ever experienced. And I'm wondering, or we're wondering, if the coronavirus has impacted fair housing practices that you've experienced. And if it has, what are those things that have been happening?
Well, I would say right now it's nothing that I have experienced yet personally, but what I am noticing pretty much is what's being mentioned that I'm thinking about as far as banks are concerned. It's being mentioned that certain banks like Chase Bank, for instance, is going to, raise their credit standards as far as going from maybe a once, 660 or 650 all the way up to a 700 credit score, along with, of course, a larger down payment. That would definitely be a concern to me as far as fair housing, because with that being said, if credit scores are actually raised and you have to actually put more money down, that I think would affect, a lot of people as far as in minority communities, which of course, which is fair housing. So I'm hoping that that doesn't happen, but I'm seeing a lot of sources mentioning that that may happen because that may cut a lot of people out of purchasing a home, especially, first-time home buyers that may not have a 700 credit score, or someone that may not have 20% down. If you're looking at an average sales price of 100,000, then that could be 20,000 down for somebody that may not be able to afford that type of down payment. So that's how I'm seeing it, affect, our market as far as Detroit is concerned.
Right. And we're probably not, we're certainly not at the end of this, or maybe even a light at the end. So the things that may come out of it are yet to be known.
Yeah, and I'm hoping
that's a good point. Just across the I think that's a good point across the board. Is that heightened credit expectations from lenders can be an issue, especially for those communities.
Yes.
And if we don't have first-time home buyers, as you know, we don't have second time, and we don't have third time. We have to start somewhere. So, as a woman of color and a business owner, and you've forged obviously a great path as a leader and a role model. What are some of your observations regarding fair housing practices in the Detroit area? I think that you bring a great perspective.
Been in the Detroit area now for about 22 years, and what I have experienced myself as far as fair housing, I would say, is the cost, the prices of home purchases versus in Detroit versus our suburban counterparts, just on the other side, basically, of 8 Mile in Detroit. This is what I've experienced. If it's like Southfield or, on the other side of 8 Mile or Ferndale, the same type of houses may be, a $200,000 house that looks exactly like on the other side of 8 Mile in Detroit that may only be priced at, $80,000 or $100,000. So I would definitely say, that, there is, something to that. If you have the same house, in one area, that's not basically the same price as another house in another area. And that, to me, since I've been in real estate, I've always seen that in Detroit, and that's always been a concern of mine. Why is there such a disparity as far as the prices are concerned in one area versus another, when you have, basically the same type of property? So I would say basically with the prices of homes that unfortunately a lot of people that are in Detroit are minorities, live in Detroit, and the home values are less than certain areas outside of the city.
Right. And so you feel that precludes somebody from moving to those suburbs because it's just, there's such a disparity?
Yes. Yes. Yes, I do. And like I said, I've noticed that basically, throughout, throughout my career in real estate. The differences between, the two, and I still don't know why yet. As far as the differences between the sales prices of, one versus the other.
It is a question I think that many of us have. And what's interesting is that you've experienced the same thing from day one, 20 some years ago to today.
Always until now.
I think that speaks volumes about how far we have to go still with regard to fair housing. This April, as we've said, is Fair Housing Month. This is the 52nd anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, and yet we're still dealing with some systemic issues that we need to focus on. And I think that's an excellent point that probably a lot of people don't think about, especially if they work primarily in the suburbs, because we're missing out on an opportunity with first-time home buyers, especially. So we know, in the code of ethics that we adhere to as a realtor, that's a crucial part of our business. That there's no exceptions for this type of thing, that we treat all people equally, that we follow the golden rule. And we talk a lot about fair housing with regard to the public home buyers, home sellers, especially renters. Have you had experience, without specific names, other realtors and issues you may have with working with other realtors with regard to fair housing issues?
With working with other realtors, I would say yes. I've had experiences in the past, with other realtors, even up until now. That's something that, I think that needs to change too. Like you said, like you just said yourself, when you're following the golden rule, and also, our code of ethics, which is one thing that I basically, first of all, live by as far as following the golden rule. I truly believe that, you would want to be treated, I would, treat others basically as I would want to be treated. And, in this industry, being of color, African-American woman myself, there has been times, in this industry, even as far as the treatment, that I've received from other realtors in our industry. But I would definitely say there needs to be some improvement there. And, I would just say to that, if you were another realtor, on the other side, like, I treat everybody the same. Basically, I treat everybody as I would want to be treated. I live by the golden rule. The thing I do is I always ask myself this question, and maybe that person needs to ask themselves this question as well. Am I treating this person the way that I would want to be treated? And that's a simple yes or no question. There's no in between,
right.
That being said. So,
there's no exceptions there. So beyond that, have you found issues working with anybody that doesn't understand the importance of inclusivity, diversity, and that may have chosen not to work with you or other realtors, or even the public?
I've definitely, and that's something, like you said, that could be improved upon with everyone, not just, realtors, but of course, buyers, sellers, and transactions. I myself have personally, had a couple of buyers or sellers in my career actually discriminate against me, even though I was actually doing my job. So yes, it does happen. Unfortunately, there are, individuals in this world that are still, discriminative towards others. And but I have had personal experiences. I would say one that stands out to me, if I may, for example, is it was an actual seller, one that I could think of in particular, whereas I went to actually list this seller's house. I forget, I think the city, it was actually in Hazel Park, I want to say, and they needed me to actually list their house. But when I got to their house, one of the questions that was asked of me from the seller, I mean, this was more of a concern to her than what I would be listing her house for or anything else. The concern was, are you putting a sign in front of my house? And if you do put a sign in front of my house, are you going to have a picture of you on the sign in front of my house. So at first I didn't really think anything of it. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's, she doesn't want a sign, but that wasn't the issue. She wanted one, but the seller just did not want a picture of me on the sign, So I could kind of, read in between the lines and, that she did not actually want a picture of me, because she blamed it on her neighbors and said, well, my neighbors don't really, take too kindly, as she put it to me, to having, I don't mean to offend you, but an African American on the sign. But, I knew deep down inside that, of course, it's not the neighbors, it's you. Right. You're accountable for your own actions, right. Not your neighbors, not anyone else. And then at the same time, of course, not really wanting to, look at me or actually shake my hand when I first came in the door either as well. But you know what, how did I handle that? On the other side of it, I just kept it professional. And also, knew that, I'm not going to step out of being professional or doing my job basically because of someone else's ignorance. So, I just learned to look over that and not let it.
Oh yeah. So the big question is, so you went ahead and listed the house.
Yes, at the end of the day, I stayed professional and I went on ahead and listed the house only because another, relative of hers asked me to, and at the end of the day, her son actually reached out to me and said, I know what was said to you. My mom kind of told me what she did and he apologized for it. And I went ahead and listed the house, but somewhat at a distance. I continued to basically keep the listing, but communicate with her son at that point. And, and just basically helped out and took the listing to the end. And like I said, at the end of the day, just remained professional. I know who I am, in it. Yeah. So.
You would be as successful as you are if you didn't have a good
exactly
business. Sure.
Right.
So have there been times when you just walked away, when you just said, this isn't going to work, this relationship isn't going to work? Or have you always found a way to turn it into a positive situation and make it work?
Well, yeah, for the most part, I turn it into a positive situation, but there, has been probably a time or two that I have walked away from it. And, with me, a person would have to be really extreme, for me to actually walk away, from a listing, based. And of course, that would be, based on how I'm treated. If it just, got totally out of hand, like, wait a minute now, then, yeah, there has been a time or two where I actually, walked away or actually fired that client, beforehand, and sometimes it is best to do that. So I'm not just going to say that, I remain with everyone. No, if you're treating me, unfairly or a way that I would not want to be treated, then of course, then I'm going to, most of the time I do walk away from it. But there have been times when, just like with that time when I worked with her son instead of her, that client that I just mentioned, then we were able to move forward with it.
And that's great. And I'm sure once they saw your professionalism, that changes the relationship. But there's times when we walk away for a myriad of reasons, or would like to anyway. When you've experienced things like that, and what kind of advice would you give to other folks about how you recognize fair housing issues? And I'm going off of script a little bit here, but I think that you probably have some good advice on when you recognize them. What do you do? What's the first step you take? It sounds like your first step is to try and educate that person and work with them. What would you suggest that we as realtors do when we find ourselves in those situations?
Well, what I've done, and what I would suggest to anyone else that does find themselves in that type of situation, as I have before, because like I said, that person that I just mentioned wasn't, the first, and it probably won't be the last, unfortunately. But what I would normally do is, what I would suggest for anyone else to do is, if it gets to a point where, right from the beginning, if I'm if you're feeling like that this person is discriminating against you or being prejudiced towards you in any type of way, then of course, you don't have to continue to work with them. You don't have to take the listing, because like I said, I have values, and I'm fair and I'm transparent with people. And if they're not treating me in the way right from the beginning that I want to be treated, then I would personally more than likely walk away from that listing.
Right.
It's not worth it, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's not going
The customer is not always right.
it's
Not when it, not when it
not
comes to
always
business,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And we teach that in Code of Ethics all the time. Look, it's
Right.
going to follow our codified set of ethics and the law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important point. And being able to walk away
Yes.
is great. So kind of to wrap this up, when we talk about fair housing, we use the phrase fair housing starts with us. As individuals, as realtors, just as a human race, how do you think we can teach each individual realtor how to do their best to ensure that they're being inclusive in all their practices?
You know what I would say to that? I would say one word to that. The word that I would use for that is transparency. Be transparent. Be transparent with us as realtors. If you're working with another realtor, be transparent with them, meaning be fair. Be fair no matter what, to all parties. Me being the realtor on the other side, the buyer, the seller, to everyone that's involved. Be as transparent, as you can. And then another thing I would say to that is, like we discussed earlier, just following the golden rule. It's just that simple. Treat others as you would want to be treated. Like I said, treat others as you would want to be treated. And again, ask yourself, would I want to be treated the way that I am treating this person? And if the answer is no, then don't treat them that way. Don't do it. See, like I said, a yes or no answer, to that. But definitely transparency, and of course, code of ethics, and following the golden rule.
Yeah.
That's it.
I sometimes I think I try to treat people like they were my mom.
Yeah.
So,
And that's what I do.
I want somebody
Right.
to treat her, right?
Exactly. And
we
you have to treat people, on all sides fairly. I mean, that's how I do business, and I feel like that's one of the keys to my success. And even being in this business this long, for almost 22 years this year, full time, is because I treat people the way that I would want to be treated. I treat people fairly, in all of my transactions and everything and just in life, and everything that I do. So, that of course flows over into my work. How you are in your life every day actually is going to flow over into your work anyway. I feel like if you're treating people a certain way, even in your work life, with you being a realtor, then to me, you're pretty much that way, even in real life, right from the get.
Right. And we know our business is becomes so personal and so relationship based. And I think that's an excellent point that you make, that you live your life that way first, and then it translates into your business. And that's what we hope all realtors do. So, we so appreciate not just today, but how you have led the way in our community, how you set the example for other realtors. As a woman of color, we know that it wasn't always easy, and probably still isn't. So we appreciate so much of that, and we look forward to seeing much more of you along the way, and hearing your great words of inspiration.
Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to join you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.